Kia ora koutou, everyone. My name's Dave Lane. I am a subject librarian at Katiaka Kopa here at Te Whare Wanga o Waitaha, and my honour of hosting this session on managing repository interactions with Figshare and Elements with Max, Sullivan and Yanan, Zhao. So Yanan Zhao is one of the digital service analysts at Lincoln University in New Zealand. Yanan is a highly experienced librarian who has a passion for integrated of library systems, and Max is the Digital Research Services Coordinator at Victoria University of Wellington. Today's session is going to be on the two institution experiences on Figshare and Elements, integration via RT2 as a data repository for Lincoln and as an institutional repository for Victoria, and their lessons learned. It aims to introduce Australia-New Zealand Figshare network with a cross-institutional forum hosted via the Trobe's Teams environment and highlight a couple of key ongoing issues. Future plans for development of each institution's crosswork will also be discussed. So I'm going to be managing the chat and the time for questions at the end. And if we can hold off questions until Max or Yanan sort of request it, and I'll sign over to Max and Yanan to begin.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Ena iwe I hui nei, tina koto katoa, ko Yanan aho, ki te mahi o, ki te whali wanaka o Raki, tina koto katoa. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Yanan from Lincoln University, and here with us today, we also have Max from Victoria University of Wellington. Now, Max, next slide. Thank you. So for this session, we're aiming to share the experiences from two institutions about the integration between Figshare and Elements. Now for Lincoln, Figshare is our data repository. For Victoria, Figshare is the institutional repository. We also intend this session to be informal. So if you do have any burning questions, please interrupt us and just ask the questions, or you can put your questions in the chat. Dave is going to monitor it for us. Thanks, Dave, again. Next slide. Next. Thank you. So first, Max and I thought we would give you a little bit of background on the crosswalk. For Lincoln, our crosswalks was created about a year ago, based on Simplicity templates, and I had a lot of helps from the Figshare and Elements user communities. Because Figshare is our data repository, so our main objective was to enable deposit of data sets and software types only from Elements to Figshare. Lincoln setup are relatively straightforward, and also we don't have many customized metadata field in our Figshare instance. So it was agreed that instead of a full migration project, the best way forward for Lincoln was through self-migration with support provided by Simplicity and Figshare support through our usual BNU support hours. We also had a few online meetings with both Figshare and Elements support staff, and we found those meetings are invaluable. We were able to resolve some issues either during the meeting or right after the meetings. And I think if we were trying to resolve those issues through emails or logging tickets, would have taken weeks. Now I'm just going to hand it over to Max, and he's going to give you some information of the crosswalk background at Victoria, and also cover some of the challenges that they encountered.
Thank you, Yanan. Kia ora, everybody. I'm Max. So I work in the library and I support Figshare and our other repository systems. So about 4 years ago, we were using a very old version of DSpace, and it was decided that we would migrate to Figshare. And at that time, we weren't even able to have any crosswalks with DSpace. So we were going into a new repository platform, and we also setting up crosswalks for the first time. So we also had quite a bit of support from the vendor along the way, and it was a fully managed project. And the vendor actually helped us with some of the more challenging crosswalk fields that we desired. I'll talk about them later. The purpose of our repository was to sort of launch side by side with an open access policy for the university. So we were, encouraging the deposit of research outputs. And we are not at this time accepting research data or the more sort of non-traditional outputs into our repository. So I'll move on to the next slide. So we had a number of challenges along the way. Some of the challenges I'm going to talk about are ongoing, and some of them are at the time of implementation. So if you're, setting up at the moment, you might be interested in some of these. So in our organization, Elements is supported by our research office. So at the time when we launched, we were working together quite closely, but now that we're, live, they have different priorities. So there've been a few things that we've wanted to do to the crosswalk, and we have to collaborate with that other team, and we have to fit into their workflow. It's not a huge problem, but it just means that we might have to wait for them to have the time to look at these things. So challenges setting up at the time were around how Figshare does metadata. If you're unfamiliar with the system, you might not know that you get to set up a whole lot of metadata yourself. You don't get a schema like Dublin Core that you can use. So we found that there were certain fields that we wanted to have, and on the screen is a couple of examples. So we wanted, for say, journal articles to have the title of the journal, and we also wanted like the publisher's DOI. So we found that when we would design these, we had to think about what the user would see. But we couldn't sort of store it in a way we would prefer for like programmatic kind of access to these fields. So you can see there that some of these fields have got spaces in them, and there's sort of different capitalization. And I think it's a mistake you'll make once where we had like journal title in our crosswalk with a capital T, and then it caused it to fail. Another kind of challenge was this preferred citation field that you can see on the screen. We wanted that to be there because the citation function in Figshare, it doesn't use any custom metadata that I know of. So we constructed this in our crosswalk. And what that means is we now have this part of the crosswalk which is doing something that we like, but it's quite complicated. And I'm just kind of conscious of how we're going to maintain that in the future. And also, if you don't have the best metadata or a full record in Elements, when the crosswalk puts this together, it might be kind of lacking certain information. So yeah, and we'd be happy to talk about that later on if you're interested in seeing more about that part of the crosswalk. Another problem we had was that we had this sort of cycle of duplicates where we would have a deposit, and then there would be another record back in Elements. And believe it or not, we had these very keen academics who would deposit that same thing again. And then there's another third one, but fortunately we were able to solve that. So at the moment, we have a nice stable crosswalk. It's working well. When we launched, we targeted 3 outputs. So we had articles, chapters, and conference papers. We've since added reports. So we took that approach because we were going into a new repository and a new crosswalk, and we didn't want to sort of open up everything. And we set up corresponding groups based on those types in our Figshare system, and each group has got custom metadata appropriate for those outputs. And we actually don't have any kind of review turned on. And I'll talk about the challenges of that in an upcoming slide. And just the screenshot is the uptake we've had in 4 years. I'll just note that theses are deposited via a different app that integrates with Figshare. So they're not part of the crosswalk because in our Element system, we only have PhD students. So we don't have masters. So we can't use the crosswalk for thesis deposit. So I'm going to now pass on to Yanan, who's going to talk about challenges at Lincoln.
Thanks, Max. At Lincoln, it's similar that our research office that owns Elements and the library support Figshare, the data repository. The slight difference is that Lincoln the library provides support of the RT2 crosswalks within Elements. I list here a few issues that I encountered that I think may be worth noting here. Our first obstacle was around user identifiers alignment. So one of the prerequisites for the systems integration between Figshare and Elements is that the user identifiers in the two systems must match in order for the deposit and harvest to happen. For us, for our Elements, we use Lincoln's email address as the user identifiers, which follows format of firstname.surname@lincoln.ac.nz, where our Figshare actually uses the Lincoln's username as the user identifiers, which follows format of surname, first name, initials plus letters, and some numbers. There was no easy formula we can follow to match those two identifiers easily. We actually ended up manually entering all the user identifiers the same way to Elements through a Figshare site. Now, I think it was doable for us because we had about just over 300 username to be manually entered. So this approach is not recommended and definitely not going to probably useful to many of your institutions, much bigger than Lincoln. However, I also think that we all have slightly different setups, and also there's many different ways of getting usernames into your systems. So I'm sure this may not even be an issue for you if you're thinking about implementing Figshare and integrating it with Elements. One thing I learned through this process, I think is worth pointing out, is that the importance of linking your technical support from the vendors, Figshare and Elements in this instance, and library and your internal IT services. This is critical to have a successful implementation. The second thing I want to mention here is around data refresh. So here at Lincoln, before we upgrade our Elements, we ask Simplistic to do a data refresh. We copy production data to our Elements development environment so that we can do a thorough testing using the most up-to-date data. And then we learned that when the data refresh happens, the Figshare data source on your production's element side will not be copied over to the sandbox. The reason I'm sure many of you have already know this is that the identifiers used in Figshare's production side are different for the item identifiers used in the non-production Figshare sites. So if you just simply copy and paste, you're going to get a set of incorrect identifiers in your system. To which remedy that, you could ask Simplistic to run a separate job for you after the initial data refresh, or you could go to your development environment, just do a full reharvest again of your data, your Figshare data source. Lastly, I also want to mention Figshare metadata. For someone like me, I'm so used to work with DSpace metadata and data schema. It was a big learning curve for me to actually understand and get familiar with Figshare's metadata and metadata schema, which is, I believe, based on dataset schema. Is available in JSON format. A very good learning resources is the Figshare's document site, which I have a URL added there. I found all the information there are really useful for me to actually learn and get speed up with what Figshare's metadata looks like. Next slide. Next, thank you. I'm going to spend the next couple of slides to talk about some ongoing issues for Lincoln. Very frustratingly, we have not been able to turn on our Figshare data source on our production side because of a major blocker issue. So at Lincoln, we want to configure our element to connect to two repositories, one for our publication, which is our disk-based institutional repository, one for our data set, which is our Figshare data repository. At the same time, we also want to configure elements so that only data set and software output type can be deposited into Figshare, and Figshare is an unavailable repository for the other research outputs. Now that become a problem as soon as we turn on both repository data sources. We get every single publication get this big deposit button, regardless of actual deposit status. So I have just a screenshot. You see the first screenshot. It is a data set which has already have a deposit, but you still get a deposit button. And when you click on the deposit button, you get a pop-up window, which is my second screenshot, which then you will see that there's already a deposit and processed in the data at Lincoln, which is our Figshare data repository. And the research at Lincoln, our disk-based institutional repository, is not available for you to do deposit. And we just think this is going to be very confusing for our researchers. And of course, we don't want to add more burdens to our researchers' workflow. So we decided that we want to fix this issue before we turn on the data source. I have copy and paste the support ticket underneath the screenshot. This issue was first raised by Dave Jones from University of Sheffield about 3 years ago. And we agreed with him that it would be clear if first the unavailable repositories were not displayed at all. And secondly, the deposit button is replaced with actual deposit status. We would love to use support on this ticket, and please vote. And I will share this ticket in the comment box chat soon. Max, next one. Thank you. This is our second issue, which I think is shared with Victoria. It's to do with the time displays in Figshare. Figshare's the time and date information is stored in UTC time in the API. And the Figshare interface then automatically converts into New Zealand time zone. It becomes a problem when we try to integrate Figshare with other systems like Elements. So I have an example here. You can see the first screenshot. This item was the first posted date was displayed as the 19th of December 2022, by the way, which is the correct publication date. But if you look at the API data, it says posted on the 18th of December 2022. Now, when we push these two elements, and all of a sudden, element record has a publication date on the 18th of December, which is not correct. This is I'm not very this is beyond my technical skills, so I don't know what would be the best solution here. However, as a librarian, I know publication date is critical, and we would like to have that fixed. Again, I got the support ticket number here. We'd like to have your support on that. Now I'm just going to hand it over to Max, and he's going to have a look at some of the ongoing issues at Victoria, and also Max going to cover what's next for both Lincoln and Victoria. Over to you, Max. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, our ongoing issues feel a lot more minor because we don't have a big blocker. I guess what we've been feeling lately is that the interface where people come to deposit isn't as configurable as we would like. We'd like to be able to add like a final question to this, just to kind of ask that people have checked, they know what they're doing, they've got permission, importantly. And you can see on the screen that the Sherpa Romeo tab, it can be hidden because we have other advice that we want people to see. So I'm not sure if people click in there, and we do try to educate we've got videos and guides, but we've had a few cases where people have deposited and immediately said, oh, that report I put up, I wasn't actually meant to do that. So, we just like to see a change here. And another thing we're interested in is having Elements harvest done paywall. I think that could give us the ability to target closed papers. I believe there's a support ticket for that, which I'll find later and put in the chat. And lastly, it's been a while, but when we did have trouble when we first went live, we had a lot of users contacting us with error messages, and they weren't particularly helpful for us or them. So it took a bit of research to figure out what was going on. So nearly at the end. So what's next? So we want to open up our repository and the crosswalk to more research outputs. So, you know, data sets and NTROs, other papers as well, like working papers. We don't actually have the relevance schema turned on. We've played with it in our sandbox, but we haven't quite got there. So this is something that lets you make a change to metadata and elements, and then it will sync across to Figshare. And we'd also like to have the dimensions grant ID included in the crosswalk. So I'm not sure if that's possible, but hopefully we can, because when you get that, there's a nice link in Figshare where people can click through and read about the grant. So for Lincoln, they are waiting on a blocker issue to be resolved. After that, they'll go live with the crosswalk, and then also configuring the relevant schema. So yeah, your support on that issue would be helpful. So finally, we just want to introduce to you a sort of a cross-institutional forum hosted by Trobe. It's in Teams, and it's a really great forum if you're working in either system to share advice, to ask a question, and to kind of strategize together. And it's, you know, for folks from New Zealand and Australian universities, and there's a few different threads. So if you're worried about it being all about integration between two, it's not. So there's a space for both systems in general discussion. And M, I believe, is here. So if you want to join, you can write a message to M. You could also get in touch with Yanan and I, and we'll help out with that. But yeah, I'd highly recommend joining. And I think this is a sort of forum where, for us in New Zealand, with our mailing list for repositories, we could think about this sort of environment, because it's been working really well. So I'm going to move on to open up the floor for questions or comments, and I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you all.
Kia ora, Max and Yanan. There's some good questions in, and it seems that some very similar themes of integration with the vendor, with the time zone difference. With the time zone difference, what do you think is the best solution for Australia and New Zealand as a whole to influence the vendor to actually reply promptly to our requests? Do you think there's a solution to that? Sorry, a bit provocative there.
Did I just say, I think there was digital science people here. Maybe pass on this question.
I think it's probably a matter for people to all, you know, write your comments on the support forum vote, and just let them know that it's an issue for you.
Yeah, I think I attended a Figshare community call that hosted by Figshare yesterday. I think someone mentioned, sorry, I can't remember your name, I'm very sorry, that they were advised that it would be helpful if, when you're commenting on those tickets, that you give a example, like describe a little, like just a few sentences, your user case, and that often helps to bump up the ticket and get more attention.
We've also had a question online from Tracy about what Elements release versions are you on?
Yeah, let me a quick check. We on 6.18. Let me have a look.
Yeah, I'll check as well. I think we kind of stay up to date as much as possible, I believe. But yeah, my colleagues in the research office manage Elements, and I don't.
It's 6.18 for us at the moment. I think there's a Max, maybe a question about paywall.
Yeah, I'm just having a read. Okay, thank you for that, Dimity. I didn't know about that through the dimensions data source, so that's actually really helpful.
Just like to put a plug in for our keynote tomorrow. We're having people from OpenAlex come and talk. They integrate unpaywall information into a much larger data set from other information as well. And I know it's new, and I know it's the sustainability of it is always a worry for large data sets like that. But we've been using it to great effect for finding things that aren't in repositories, and then targeting people. And in fact, we'll be talking about that as part of the open access roundup tomorrow as well. So shameless plug.
Thank you, Anton. There's also a question on the forum. Did Victoria migrate everything from DSpace?
We migrated all of our theses. That's our Figshare is our new home for theses. But we didn't migrate other things, so we actually still run a DSpace system as well. And that's mainly used for like stuff that's meant just for our university users. But we still keep a few collections open. So yeah, the things that we wanted to migrate were like working papers, and which we have a lot of, but we wanted to also set up elements to let new ones be deposited, but we haven't quite got there. So we've been a bit slow to progress that kind of thing.
As we get close to our time zone, and Anton will kick us off because he's the next person coming, I'll finish with, if that's right, a last question aimed at Max. With Figshare, and we talk about sort of impact of the output from Victoria, have you noticed, or have you been able to prove any statistical improvement on a number of hits in access to your theses because it's now posted on Figshare previously versus DSpace?
I'd like to say yes. So one thing that we can do now is, because we never had DOIs before for our theses, we can now track citations. And Figshare has a citation tracking feature as well. So we're now seeing citations for theses, which is cool. And we're also seeing alt metrics as well. So we can see engagement in those spaces. And I hate to say it, we've seen people take our theses and put them on Amazon. So we didn't see that before. So, that's another challenge of having a really findable open repository. Just comment to Kim in the chat. No, at the moment we're going to keep DSpace going, because I didn't mention it, but with Figshare you can't have a mix of an open file and a private file, and you also can't have metadata that is for admin only. And we need those things before we can think about having just Figshare, because we have a lot of we have forms that students completed with their thesis. We have data sets that they don't want us to make available to everybody. We have metadata as well that we don't want to open up to everybody. So
awesome. Well, we're running short on time, so I'd like to thank Max and Yanan. Really, really interesting talk. I'm glad that that's the right term, that everybody seems to have some similar issues and you're not outlying. So thank you very much for appearing on today, and we're going to throw all the way back on the radio to the host of the event, Anton.